Warning. Listening to this show may result in increased levels of inspiration, motivation, and innovation. Side effects can include the immediate urge to take massive action to build a better business and life for yourself and others. You've been warned. Welcome to Influencers Radio with your host, Jack Mize.
And welcome to this episode of Influencers Radio. Today, this is, I'm going to say, kind of get rid of distractions. And, or if you're in your car, if you are on the treadmill, whatever you are doing, listening to this, pay attention to this, because this is really some very good and I may not be choosing my words right, intense stuff, because this is the subject matter that is really the make or break that pushes people from being good at what they do, pushes people from even being considered one of the best at what they do to being the elite in what they do. And not just in the eyes of others, but in the eyes of yourself. Because one of the things that I really recognized as I was, researching and really learning more about what my guest today does, it's about if you're in a position in your business, in your life, and in your job, any of this, where you give off the appearance of being successful, and not that you're not successful, but if people feel that or think that you look to be more successful than you actually feel inside, that's a very common place and plateau that entrepreneurs get to. And it's not something that's unique, but it is something that really causes a lot of concern and affects the growth of a lot of entrepreneurs, and really affects it unnecessarily. And today, my guest is Victor Bell Jr. He is the founder of the Champion Program, Champion Army War College. And really, this guy has trained MMA fighters, wrestlers, elite special forces and rangers, military soldiers, professional football players, Olympic athletes, CEOs, executives. And you may think, wow, that's a pretty broad stroke. All those different, how does he teach them? Well, the fact is, he doesn't teach them the mechanics of what they do, of their profession, of what they are good at, because they are already good at what they're doing. What Victor Bell Jr. does is he is considered the secret weapon to a lot of these elite athletes and executives and entrepreneurs, because he helps them become the person that does the things that are required to move into that elite position. And we're going to go deeper into this because it is just some of the most fascinating concepts and in probably mindset understanding that you're ever going to hear in this length of time. So, Victor Bell Jr., welcome to Influencers Radio.
Thank you, my friend, for having me on.
All right, I got to start this out with one thing, and we're going to go in because you have a pretty fascinating background and the way that you kind of got to where you are and the things that built up your knowledge and ability to help others with some pretty common but important struggles. Is the one thing that jumped out at me is you say the universe doesn't give out participation trophies.
It does not.
And that's what I love, because you are a guy that you just wipe out. Forget about this. Everybody, do your best and you'll get to where you need to get to, right? You're the person that says, hey, there's a difference between doing all that you can do and doing all that you're willing to do. And that's where you really cut through and change people's lives and the direction and the trajectory of their business and their lives. So let's talk about that. What does that mean? The universe doesn't give out participation trophies.
Well, I understand that, the common dogma out there is, say, do your best and things will kind of work out for you, or you're kind of predestined, predetermined. And I just don't believe that. I believe that everyone does have an ability to go out there and be successful and win. Yet at the same time, If you're just thinking that it's going to fall on your lap and it's going to kind of, it's going to bump into you or you're going to bump into it, I totally beg to differ. I think that it's work. I think that there are certain things that you do, or there are certain things that successful people do internally, constantly, that continue to help them climb. And without knowing that and without doing that up front, that there is no, you just can't win, or you will be dominated by someone who understands that fact. So by saying that the universe doesn't give out participation trophies is total truth, is that just because you showed up doesn't mean that you're going to be successful, that you're going to have to put in work.
And that's what a lot of people hear all the time, because that's what makes people feel good. It makes them feel comfortable, or give them a safety net that if it doesn't work out, that's okay. Right. Because,
right.
Hey, life dealt you this set of cards, and you got to do your best with the hand that life dealt you. And what you're saying is, no, if that's the hand that life dealt you, throw away the cards and let's go get some new ones. Right.
Exactly.
And that's where I think it changes from the way that most people live their lives of, I'm doing the best with the hand that life dealt me, to where you're saying, no, it's time to get a new deck of cards. And I think, the important thing that I got out of this is that you are very much into, it's all your fault, but it's also all your responsibility, and it's all your reward when you do this. And it sounds like one of the first things that you do is you have to go out and claim accountability for everything that you do. Because obviously one of the easiest things that people can do is blame situations, circumstances, people in their lives for where they are in their lives. And you are pretty tough and strict about the fact that that's not going to fly. And that's one of the first things that people have to cut out in order to move well beyond where they are.
Yes, definitely on that.
And so that's a tough thing to do. That's a tough thing to do is for someone to claim accountability, because it is easy to say, well, I'm like this because I grew up in this situation, or I'm like this because I had this happen to me. And, how do you get past that? Because that's a tough pill for some folks to swallow, to say that, nope, forget all that. Now, you're able to put all that aside and do far more than what you've expected of yourself so far.
Well, when I explain to people what the word champion means, I express to them that champion, by definition, is someone who conquers, whether they're conquering one thing or they're conquering for other people. And people who conquer cannot be not responsible for their circumstances. And once they understand that when you become responsible for where you are or what's happening to you, even if you feel like you aren't at the helm of the ship, taking some level of accountability in that gives you also the ability to make changes in the next path, in the next step, in the things that you do to be, to take things to the next level. If it is that you're trying to conquer something, business, personally, whatever that is, you cannot do that until you accept 100% accountability for where you are, what's happening, so you can course correct as needed. And without that, no one will get past where they are today, even if you're doing fine, unless you become accountable for where you are in the level where you say you're fine. And you want to go to the next level of that, you can, until you claim ownership of the level where you are, and then begin to claim ownership of the next level where you want to go. So it's just that has to be phase one. And that's an uncomfortable thing for people to do, and that therein lies the problem. People who win consistently find ways to be more uncomfortable in those situations, which is why they're able to continue to succeed where other people stop.
Well, that's an important point. I think that you've really identified and are extremely good at getting people past when you say comfort, right? Because comfort really is the enemy of growth, I guess, in just about anything. If you're comfortable, then all of a sudden you have something to lose if things go sideways, right? And people don't like to, if they're comfortable, it's easy just to stay there. They may want for more things. They may wish they had a greater success, but a lot of the people that you work with aren't satisfied with that. And so one of the first things that you talk about is that this requires you to be uncomfortable and do things that are uncomfortable.
Exactly. I just express to all my guys, like, you must always be about your next campaign, meaning that every time there's been some level of success, or you just had a success, or even if you had a downtime, then you need to be about the next campaign. You always need to be in preparing, or in some level of preparing for where you are going to go next. And that's it. That does take a level of overcoming a pretty high level of discomfort, even if you are totally successful. I mean, going to the next level of any phase of where you are now, there's going to be some area of growth. And if you're not about the next campaign, if you're not constantly preparing for where you're going to go, you aren't going to grow, period. I mean, it stops there with you.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, when I talked about when I was at the top of the show was a lot of the folks that you work with, from all appearances to people around them, is they have it together. They have achieved success. They are where a lot of folks want to be. But maybe internally, they realize that they could do so much more, but they're starting to feel that fear. We talk about nothing left to lose. When people are first starting out, it's easy to go out, just come out swinging. You've got nothing to lose. But once a lot of the folks that you work with are successful, in fact, considered very successful in their craft and what they do. And now all of a sudden, maybe they do have something to lose. And it's that fear of loss that can be very, very strong. And one of the things that I see that you do, it's not about removing fear. It's about dealing or overcoming fear, or becoming that person that can succeed around that fear. Talk about that, because that's really, I think, where your magic happens, is around that mindset and getting around those obstacles that folks have. So if someone is sitting in a place where, I'm successful, this is probably good enough for a lot of people, but I know I'm capable of so much more and I've got to bust through this. But, all of a sudden there's risk. How do you start working through that?
Like I said a minute ago, it's like understanding that there is a next campaign. So typically, if you're going to set eyes or sights on something like that, you're going to prepare yourself very differently than a lot of other people would. And like you said, kind of looking at overcoming fear, overcoming those risks, is not that you're going to be able to remove those things, because you're moving into an area that is very unfamiliar to you, which is why it's uncomfortable. But when you prepare yourself correctly, you have the right people on your team, so far as like coach, mentor, things like that, and you're around people who are also pushing that element of that. I'll say, like, it's an internal drive, this internal competitor, so to speak. That willingness to conquer in momentum is infectious, and you go for it. Like you said a minute ago, some of the guys who seemingly are successful have really settled themselves or nestled themselves in that success by being comfortable. And it's really hard to be, to want to go, say if you're running at 100 miles an hour and you want to kick it up to 120, the fear is that you're going to get to 120 and lose your ability to run at 100 if you lose. And then at 120, you're around a new peer group, you're around a new social environment. The risk is very much higher. But to be able to overcome that fear, you have to, one, claim accountability for that area. Two, you have to understand and really trust yourself. You have to have some, and you and I discussed it, some standards that you set for you as a level of discipline, personally, mentally, physically. All these things have to be intact. So when you step up and you hit that opposition at the next level, fear doesn't grip you so bad to where you can't function. You're already mentally prepared. You're already physically prepared. You already have the strategies necessary to keep going. So it's not that you don't encounter fear or you won't hit some type of friction or resistance at that level, but you're just so prepared for where it is that you have to go. You kind of stop deviating and thinking and being worried and concerned. You just continue to push through there. In my mind, that's a conqueror. That's an elite player. That's an elite performer. That's a high-level player for the people that we tend to work on. And those are the things that we share with our guys who specifically have to do that.
Right. And so I want to point something out, because I'm going to get in a bit of trouble here with, it maybe not be politically correct but the fact is, you develop the Champion program, the Champion Army War College. You deal with MMA fighters and athletes and professional football. And, I think I just got to say it sounds very testosterone driven. Right. And so not that I'm, trying to neglect or, women that certainly are capable of doing this thing, but you tend to attract and work with men entrepreneurs. And first I thought, wow, this sounds kind of aggressive. This sounds, kind of, at war with this, and you have to fight for what you're doing. And then I realized what you're doing isn't necessarily aggressive or done out of anger, but you are at war, but not necessarily with someone else. It's not that someone has to lose in order for you to win. It really sounds like it's about you're at war with, taking that accountability back to understand your accountability, at war with adversities that you have inside yourself, and at war with overcoming those fears or working around the fears. So, they kind of give a description of those types of folks that you're working with, because it is primarily men, and you are very aggressive about the way that you overcome this stuff.
Yes. Primarily, we work with the male entrepreneurs. Typically, male entrepreneurs that are in an environment where they're in high pressure situations. A lot of their decisions affect a lot of other people. Typically, in their position, they don't have a lot of we call them friends. Because when you're at the top level, that leadership office is typically a lonely office to occupy. So those people are usually attracted to us. For my purposes, I tend to work with a lot of guys just because I tend to also work with a lot of men in the MMA segment, wrestling segment, the special forces guys, some of my male entrepreneurs and things like that they are also athletes as well, because it's a pretty high level comparable fit to the activities, if that makes sense from a mindset standpoint. So yes, the people that we work with are typically male. And they're primarily, right now they're all entrepreneurs because of the understanding that we have of what it takes and the stress levels that they have are, even to the level of an elite level athlete or a military person or personnel.
Right. And one of the things that, I mentioned that you're considered the kind of the secret weapon of a lot of these folks is because, a lot of your most successful clients and the folks that work with they have grown up, they come from the right families. They've gone to the right schools. They've done the right things to build up their career and become the people that they are at that point. But this is kind of a disconnect between them and your background. But after we started going through this and you started unfolding, kind of the way that you work and the things that you do, it started to make perfect sense that in order to move out of that comfort zone, they have to not do what the people in their positions traditionally do. They have to not do what people would think is the common logic of that. So let's dive into that a little bit. You're working with these folks that, people see in a certain light, and, they think about this is the way that these people work, or, they, like I said, the right schools, the right backgrounds. And here you are, someone that doesn't really share that background, that history, that you came up in a very different path than a lot of the folks that you help, which now I see gives you a tremendous advantage in your ability to help them. So let's talk about that. You kind of became autonomous and taking care of yourself at a fairly early age, correct?
Yes, I did. You were sharing that, and I was smiling because it's true. That gives me an advantage that others don't. So I have people in my program that are, Ivy League college grads, and alumni to some pretty, substantial colleges. They're professionals, they're attorneys. We got, financial advisors to some pretty, heavy lifters. We have some pretty heavy commercial investors that own a lot of developers, things like that. And the benefit for having somebody on the team like me is what I expressed, is that you can't kill a wolf with a sheep. A lot of these guys go out into their peer groups and hope to be able to take down some of the things. But because I think differently and strategize differently, when we put their problems on the table with the solutions that I'm able to come up with together, we have very big successes. And it's not always the way that they've been taught or what they're used to or how they would normally overcome a challenge by going to their typical peer group, because their peer group ultimately understands what they understand. And in a competitive environment that they play in, they cannot compete by competing the way everyone else does. They have to step aside and get somebody on their team as a liaison, or somebody that sees what they cannot see from the playing field, and that person has to strategically operate very differently. Like we've shared, it's when things become important, people call me because they understand that I'm going to work with them directly to attack something in a way that ultimately they may not have even thought of before because they don't think the way that I do. So I've become this secret weapon to a lot of them as being this asset that has given them strength. And people are like, where'd you guys even come up with that? And, how'd you come up with that? So, I mean, this isn't typical. This is, away from the norm. And how would you even manage to push through this obstacle? And they kind of just keep it to themselves, which has been an interesting thing. So it's been something that I found interesting. It's been a blessing, to be considered those things with the people that I'm able to interact with on that level, by being seen as this secret weapon to people, at the magnitude that they do, because I am not a part of their peer group. So that's why they come, as opposed to the opposite.
Yeah. And I think that right there is because the type of people you work with are not coming looking to for someone that's going to make them feel good about their circumstances. Right. And that's what a lot of people look for. They look for someone that's going to reinforce and make them feel okay about where they're at so they can just accept that. You take them to a whole different place. And I think that's where a lot of your background, comes into play because, I think of an analogy of if you think about an elite athlete, whether it's, baseball, football or whatever. And, if you've ever seen these documentaries of these guys that are legends and then you go to their background, they weren't training at the country club, right? They weren't training at the air conditioned, perfectly painted and kept clean gyms. They were training in the uncomfortable, dark, dingy, really places that you wouldn't expect. So in that same analogy, they're taking it back to someone that's kind of come from the school of hard knocks and applying real street level mental toughness. And I think that's probably the phrase I like to use is they're already physically tough. They're already tough in the mechanics of what they do and knowing how they do what they do. But what you do is you really get them prepared mentally and build that mental toughness to get to where they are going. And you've built up those muscles, those mental muscles and those calluses from your life, right? So you kind of start taking care of yourself early on. You did what a lot of folks do in circumstances like that. You went into the military, right? Right.
I did. I went to a combat MOS. As a matter of fact, I was in the infantry and recon and scouts and a bunch of other stuff as well.
Now that requires some mental toughness, right? That's not a cakewalk, right? You're not going to a cake and an ice cream party when you do that, right?
Exactly. That's your job. Just yourself and your gun. We weren't a mechanized, so there was no riding. It was all walking, and it had everything to do with your physical and mental attributes, because when you break down mentally, you can't function physically, and when you can't function physically or mentally, other people suffer. So that was one of the main things that was really drilled home. If anything, if nothing else was learned, that was ingrained in all of us going into the career field that I was in when I was in the military.
So you left the military. And you were, you had this mental toughness. You probably had a higher tolerance of risk, obviously, when you're in those types of situations. And you don't hide the fact that your next endeavor, entrepreneurial pursuit after you left the military was, in the pharmaceutical industry to a certain extent, right?
Yeah, street pharmaceuticals, yes, sir.
So not to make light of that, it's a serious thing, but that's, you got in there and it's an allure to a lot of folks. But the fact is, if we go straight to the core of that selling drugs on the street, obviously that's not the right thing to do. It's illegal, but it's where you were. And, if you just look at the facts, you developed some fairly sophisticated and profitable strategies in that building that entrepreneurial mind while you did that. And luckily, somebody got you out of that, or you were forced to get out of that, to a certain extent. Yeah, the police. Okay. So that they did their job, but the fact is you developed some skills that most of the people that you work with never were exposed to, I guess you would say, right?
Yeah. Yes, I built an organization from scratch. I've never done drugs in my life. I don't even drink. So when I was doing those things, I just saw it. Man, I'm not making light of it as a business. I saw it as a supply and demand situation. I started off with nothing, and I built what I needed to build based on what I understood how to do, which was mitigate my risk. I understood people. I learned how to keep my mouth shut, to learn who people were, keep people, doing all these other things, and position myself a lot differently to get people to like me as where I needed to be liked, or to get people to not like me where I needed to be feared, so I could maneuver freely as I needed to as I grew. And eventually, like I said, not making light of that circumstance, but this is all the inner workings. There's no difference between a top CEO and a street drug dealer. If he's truly a drug dealer, not some guy who's like a gangbanger or killer like we see on TV. That's not what I'm talking about. But that lesson was a real-time lesson, and the risk is not being removed from chair by the board. The risk there was prison. The risk there was jail. The risk there was death. A lot of my friends, from back in that timeline, are in prison still, or in and out of prison, or they have been killed or died, or they're dead. Families lost to that lifestyle. So I got the opportunity to see those things, and naturally, as I came out of that and got busted and police did their job, and I had the charges that I had, it kind of put me in a situation where I had to find employment, which I was not. My background wasn't the greatest, because I had a felony charge now, and then I also was in the military. And in the job that I was in the military, it wasn't like I can, jump right into like this huge college thing where I can get this awesome job, because of the criminal background. So I opted to learn, real estate, no money down. We buy houses, real estate. And I did very well in it, pretty earlier on, based on what I understood about the tenacity that it took, because I likened the elite athletes, even the some of the street drug dealer stuff, to the high level risk that it takes to get into, let's say, real estate investing, because it's an all or nothing business. You make a lot, or you risk and you lose everything. I've done that too.
Well, that's an important point. I want to make sure that we don't skip over that. So, dealing with drugs, and like you said, it's not something that, we're trying to glamorize at all, but really put a spotlight on the fact that it was a business, and it did have a big risk involved. And so one of the things I think that is actually has built you into a person that is able to help the people that you do, is that it wasn't the fact that you were able to escape risk. You faced risk, and oftentimes risk won, right? The downside won. This isn't about winning every single time. It's about becoming a person that can come back from when risk does win, because I think that's probably one of the things that gives you the biggest strength and the biggest advantage that most of the people that your clients haven't faced, is that you have faced whether your risk is 2% or 90%, there's a chance that risk is going to win, and you face that, right? And so,
I definitely want to point out what you said, and you're definitely 100% totally correct with that. Sometimes when you face risk wins. And my lesson in that, and what you said made sense, and I want to kind of point this point out. The recovery to move forward after you've lost with risk is not to consistently go back and face that, whatever it is that you were risking again. Like, I didn't go back to that. I moved on to something else and took the lesson that I lost with risk and the lessons that I had won with taking those risks to another endeavor that put me in a better position. So, I wanted to point that out. A lot of people think you get into a situation and you go and you risk and you lose, and then you get back up, and then getting back up and facing the same risk without taking the lessons to win, to move forward so you don't face that same risk again. There has to be some uptick of the lesson to get you past. That's that new campaign I shared with you earlier. You have to be about the endurance campaign.
Yeah, because that's the problem that a lot of people face, whether it's in the stock market or even playing blackjack. People think that they have to win their money back the same way they lost it, right? That's the only way that they're going to win. So it's not that you got, in trouble with drugs, they caught you, and then you think, no, I got to go right back out there and prove that I can win this drug, right? Yeah. It's like you took the lesson and thought, okay, well, let me learn from this and let me apply this into something that is, let's at least go over and let's apply this to something legal now, right? And exactly. So you took the lessons of risk aversion, and you took the things that you have to look out for, and you moved into the real estate because I think probably one of the, if you look at the big picture, not being able to get a job was probably one of the best things that happened to you, right? Because if you had got a job, you would have definitely gone to the traditional, probably limiting life that a lot of people lead. So let's talk about the real estate. You went and built up real estate, and you became fairly successful. You acquired a lot of properties in that realm. And so let's talk about that. One, how you built the success. And then two, how, that pesky risk came knocking on your door again.
Yeah, definitely. I honestly, in the grander scheme of things, short story, I bought a book from the store and I read it and I was like, I can do that. It's not, I'm going to be doing something. And in the end, it's just people, I'm going to take the same risk, and this risk is a lot less than the other one. I'm not going to get shot or go to jail. It's just that I didn't win. I didn't get a paycheck, or I didn't buy a property. So, I started off, bought a book from the store, used the script from the book and the newspaper, and I sat behind the phone and I called. And eventually I picked up 24 properties that first year. Didn't really know what I was doing. I met a gentleman who started slowly pointing me in the right direction, kind of took me under his wing and mentored me during the meantime. And I bought properties over and over and over and over again, using baseline strategies in my mind that was no different from what I had done when I was kind of like hustling and selling and doing all this other stuff, because it was the same concept to me. Was there was a risk, there was a strategy, or there was things that needed to be done, and then I just replicated those, but it was less the strategies and more about my mentality about what needed to be done. I didn't understand why people were having such a tough time with the real estate business or getting involved in it. And then later it was kind of, pointed out to me, like, you're different. And I was, like I have a different background. I see challenges a little differently. I don't stop at those points, and I started helping other people. And then at that point we acquired a lot of property, lost a lot of property, acquired a lot of property. And eventually, years and years down the road, we end up getting filed for bankruptcy. We took down some pretty big apartment complexes and shopping centers and things like that over time.
Right. So let's talk about this. So you had the success, but you hit something, and I don't know, would you call it, bit off something more than you could chew at that time, or because I know you're definitely not one about blaming circumstances and it's all about you, but circumstances obviously happen, especially in the real estate business. So, a tsunami came through and knocked out what you had built up very, very quickly.
Yeah, I tend to shorten the conversation and take, like I said, 100% accountability for what happened. But in this circumstance, it was a reposition project in Ohio. It was an apartment complex. We picked it up for $400,000. It was worth $1.3 million or $1.4 million. We were doing a full renovation and renovating the property. The property manager / project manager of the renovations drained our escrow accounts and mine's and about 70 other people's, and skipped town, and they closed their business, and there was the whole class action lawsuit against them. I took it on the chin, spent the last bit of money that we had to make sure that we, paid the electric and the heat and all the other stuff in the wintertime for the few families that were still in the building, and eventually we ran out of money. So that was us again being responsible, being accountable for. We were recognizing that there was a situation, that there was nothing that we could do physically, but accept our responsibility of the project itself. And that's where the bankruptcy came into play. Right.
And so with that bankruptcy, that's where a lot of people would just curl up and say, game over. That's I'm done. And one of the things that you do is bankruptcy, you looked at that as, no, this is a circumstance that I happen to be living in at the moment, but it's not who I am. right? And I think that's one of the big important things because, in bankruptcy isn't a sideline hobby. It consumes your life when you're going through that, right? So how long did that take to go through that?
That took me about a year to go through that, of being scrutinized and being scrutinized. Have a lot of our personal finances being weighed out and deals being unraveled, and a lot of, not everyone has the same mindset that, we do. So there's a lot of people crying foul at different areas where we're like, okay. And we just have to deal with those things. And it wasn't that I wasn't tested in these moments either. It wasn't like I didn't cry and punch the ground and God, why? Because I felt as though during the times I was doing the honorable, admirable things in these environments. And then there was still circumstances that happened. But there was just a point, even in that moment, where, I had to really kind of buck up and go, okay, what are we doing here? And have a conversation with my wife. I'm like, look, we're going to go through this, and day of out of it, I'm going to put my nose down and work. So if I become a little weird, forgive me, but I'm going to get this back. And I think, we stayed in bankruptcy roughly, or under the microscope for 12 months. And then right after that, within 90 days, we were financially free and had picked up about $10 million worth of real estate.
See, that right there is where most people would check. Most people, okay, we're out of bankruptcy. It's time for me to go get a job. We'll eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, get on our feet, and start living a normal life. But that's wasn't what you accepted. You said, okay, we're done. Let's go back out and start swinging again.
Right.
And so you said within about 90 days after your bankruptcy, what was that? What was it that you did right after that?
We picked up about $10 million worth of real estate. So
that right there is just, mind blowing to a lot of folks. And I think, that's one of the things that it seems like that you help people get past is because if you were to say, this is what I'm going to do, I would think 90% or more of the population would say, Victor, that's not realistic. Right.
Well, I did what my typical client does. And, because I still had the look of success. We had the oceanfront house. We had the really nice car. We had all this stuff. And then all of a sudden I was this guy who's well known in my peer group. And then all of a sudden I lost it all and I was embarrassed. Who was I going to tell I was bankrupt? We lost everything because of this and that, especially that I wasn't going to play the victim role. And then going back in, and then when they did find out, or the few people that I let in on my private circle of have this conversation of where we were, what were they going to say? What could they have done? I knew for myself, I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I think when I actually did tell my peers, I had already bought all the property. We were already back on top of things. They were like, how did you do it? And I was like, I did what I always do. And I kind of bucked it off. But it was one of those scenarios that, again, like I said, I tell my guys in the program that we do when we run champion, like I'm created to conquer and so are you. So whatever's going on outside of that conversation in your head, stop it. And let's have a real conversation about where you are. I'm not your friend. I'm not your peer group. I don't care about the calm conversation that they would have with you to rub your back and make you feel good. This is not going to feel good. We have to get this done.
Well, I think that right there is the core of that's the discomfort. And you have people face that discomfort because either they're going to face the discomfort in a controlled environment or they're going to face that discomfort when life throws it at them, so one way or the other, they're going to face the discomfort. But that's where I think where you come in and what changes things is I guess really the preparedness. You prepare them that it's going to be uncomfortable, but be prepared for that discomfort. And that's where I think that mental toughness comes in is it's not about like you said, the muscles that they see in the mirror. It's that muscle in their head that if you prepare for something that's going to happen, then it's a much easier blow to take. And I say that kind of as an analogy, but it's also a very realistic parallel because, oh, by the way, while you're doing this, you also fought professionally as a mixed martial arts. Right?
Yes, I did.
Well, sure. You had time on your hands, right? So let's go.
I did.
And not just fought, but you also trained other MMA fighters.
Yes, I do. Like I said, that's how I've kept the peace. Like I said, it's finding that, like I said, it's that next campaign. It's that level of stress that I personally inflict on me and find my way out of it so I can think a little differently than other people, like I said before. So yeah, I did do that. And during that time, even doing some sparring and stuff like that, I had a health injury. I got punched in the face really hard and it detached my retina really bad on one side, and it was deteriorating and detaching on another side. So I was faced with that, seeing a spot, being normal, and then going to the doctor and say, hey, you're going to be blind in a month unless you get emergency surgery, and you're going to be in recovery for a year, and this has to happen now. What do you want to do?
So you're and this isn't something you can say, hey, doc, obviously you haven't heard of what I've been through already. Time out.
I said that. I said that and left. And ended up coming back up and talked to him, and I was like, I've been told a lot of stuff and a lot of things that people said were going to happen to me. What is the real probability here? And he was like, it's 100%. So I made the decision. I was like, okay, fine, let's get it done. What is my healing? And he was telling me what my healing phase was, but then he also said, you're not going to be able to wrestle. You're not going to be able to do MMA. You're not going to be able to lift anything over 30 pounds. You're not going to be able to do anything. You slip in the bathtub from now for the rest of your life and you hit your face, you run the risk of losing the, when we reattach your retina, you run the risk of having this go in the reverse.
And so
and I was like,
you've gone through all this. You had the resilience. You had, the comeback from what a lot of people would feel are just completely, insurmountable obstacles and setbacks. And so you've kind of found your stride. You've built up your portfolio of properties. You're fighting and training MMA. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, Victor, hold up. You can't have this kind of comeback here. By the way, you're going to be blind. Right. And so that adversity,
right.
When you talk about bankruptcy, that's a huge deal. And you talk about pounding your fist and saying, why this happened to me? At some point, most people would say, all right, you know what? Somebody's got it out for me. Right.
Yeah. There was a little laughter when the doctor said that, because I know that, with all the stuff that had went on prior, all of a sudden it seemed like things are going well. And then that was just like, okay, yeah, it was seemed to just be something else that at some point I was going to deal with. It was like,
So
yeah.
did you feel that, because I can tell right now, and I think this is unfolding for anyone listening, that this whole process, this journey is not about these circumstances happening to you. It's about, this is all what developed you into, not getting past these, but becoming the person that it's required for a person to become to overcome all of these obstacles. Because
yes.
Even after all this, you're sitting right here, back with what would look like on top of the world and helping others do the same thing. And I think that none of that could be possible without you going through these things. And I think that's what gives you that makes you that secret weapon, is the fact that, hey, you're worried about loss. Guess what? I've lived it. You're worried about risk. Yeah. Guess what? I've lived it. And you know what? It happened and I came back. It's never the end of the road. That it
right.
only makes you stronger. It only makes you more successful in what you do. And these are, like I say, opportunities that a lot of the folks that you work with haven't had a chance to live through life. So really what they get to do is, they always say, learn from your mistakes. I think the secret sauce to you is they get to learn from Victor's mistakes. They get to learn from Victor's losses. And you're able to, really this real experience that you've had, and not theory, not, I know someone that knows someone. You've lived it, not once, not twice, but multiple times, and able to overcome this. And so by doing this, at what point when your clients, do they realize that, okay, I realize I don't need someone to tell me how to pedal faster. I don't need someone to tell me how to, do something tactically different, that I certainly don't need someone to come in and agree with everything I say and saying that I'm the best. You're great, right? I call it, we talked about that the Elvis's yes men, right? Did him no good,
right?
You're a person that comes in and says, hey, get over it. Here's what, you're going to do. And you get them to start this war, to start fighting for that next level of what they're able to do, because the risk. It's not about mitigating the risk. It's about saying, if the risk happens, if the risk wins, we can still overcome it. Right. And so at what point do you see that people recognize that maybe this discomfort, maybe it's not as bad as I think. Maybe I shouldn't be, the fear of loss is not as great as what it was, that now it's time to actually go out and start swinging again, because they know that there's so much more in them. Do they have that moment that they realize that, or, how does that progress?
It's ironic that you say that. At least in the athlete environment, we call it, there's a switch. I mean, I think in every person that achieves something in life, they hit this part of this, like this crossroad of where they are. And I recognize it because I've worked with enough people in my lifetime to have that experience with them while they're there. There's this part, like I said, when I even in myself, I was punching the ground. God, what is it that I do? Where tears come out and there is no answer. And I posted it, I said it, I've written it down. It's like, in the absence of a hero seeks counsel and then becomes his own. And that there's a part where most of my guys come to me and there's a problem or there's a challenge that they themselves understand that the only person that can get them through that is themselves, and they need somebody on their team during the time that they have never needed before. Ironically, that's the switch. That's the I'm all in and I'm 100% accountable for what's getting ready to happen. And I can't take anyone else on this ride with me other than someone who understands and someone who's going to give it to me straight. Whereas when I'm waging war for myself, against myself, they will keep me on track and let me recognize where I'm strong, not point out my areas where I'm weak.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that I see and I've seen you talk about is you make them war ready. Yeah, right. They're ready. You look them in the eye and you confidently let them know you will be war ready. And I think people, when they see that, if you've ever watched any war movies or any of those where there's that moment where people are feared, bombs are going off and they're like, oh my, I can't believe we're in this, to the part where you see them turn and you're like, you know what? Screw it. We're going to win. And that's what I think that changes. Is
exactly
that it goes from the fear, it goes from the what if to, you know what, it doesn't matter what if, I'm going to keep swinging and I'm going to win this. And that right there, I think, is such a crucial moment, because so many people live out of fear of loss. And a lot of people don't see that way. If they have nothing, you got nothing to lose. So, I often say when I'm going down, a guy can go down into very poor parts of town and I see someone, a homeless person sitting on the side of the road, and I can look just a few blocks down to the executive rushing to his office, and I'm thinking, which one of these are really free, right? This homeless guy can get up and walk in any direction he wants to,
exactly.
And this executive is a prisoner to the success that he created, that he's more afraid of losing what he has than of taking the potential to what he could have. And I see the true value and why you are considered that secret weapon is you get them to let go of that fear of losing what they have and realizing that, screw it, I'm going to take what I know is possible, and I'm going to win this war against my own adversity, my own fear, get out of my own way. And that's just when it hits you, it's like, that, oh my gosh, this is just so incredibly powerful. And I can imagine the people that you work with, when they hit that moment and realize that shift from I'm scared. The bombs are going off. What if this, what if that, to, you know what, screw it. I'm ready to go into the war and make this happen. And that's got to be a tremendous feeling for both you and them, to see the folks do it.
We call it, I say it to all my guys, right? It's a silence. People think champion. They think, especially now it's real fashionable to be a guy who yells and screams and runs. And I like I said, there's a moment for those things. But for people who are in their mind going to win anyways, they're not going to stop. There's no yelling. There's no screaming. That just invokes a feeling that is a high and then an extreme low shortly afterwards. My guys, when they're in that moment, you wouldn't know. I know. We know each other because we bond differently. And my entrepreneurs that do things very differently. But in the end, it's this calm feeling like I got it. I understand. And I'm willing. And that's a relentless moment too. I always tell people, like, someone in the flow of going, you don't want to be a person that's opposing them at that moment because they won't stop. They'll be quiet. They'll be calm. But they'll be relentless and then very intense at that moment. And it's something that I think you and I were sharing earlier that I share with my guys as a place to seek and find. And that's that war that we seek to be in, because it's not what's depicted out there publicly, which is why, like I said, my guys tend to enjoy me in a different way than people would think.
Yeah, well, it's just incredible to see that, and I recognize that now. I see that they're out there playing, and it's just like the great fighters. One of the people that may be the most responsible for their getting through a fight and claiming that championship is the guy that's down in the corner who is their cut man, because it keeps the mental toughness and things like that. And it's not someone that and you're not looking for the praise. You're not looking for the credit on this. And I think that's one of the big benefits that folks have is you let them win. So let's say someone's ready to, they want to play that champions game and what they're doing. How can they find out more about, Victor Bell Jr. and what it is that you do and how you do it?
I did my best to make it very easy to be contacted. So I put together, they would go to www.victorbelljr.com, and contact me there. There's a place to be contacted, and they would just put their information, and we would structure a time to talk, and I would reach out to them, and they can let me know exactly what's going on, and I can see if what I do is actually a fit or can help them.
Well, that is simple. I gotta say, Victor Bell Jr., this is just tremendous stuff, and something that I think is missing from the equation to success for so many folks' business, because people think that I've reached success. Maybe is this all there is? Is this what success is supposed to feel like? Everybody's looking at me like I'm successful. Everybody's talking to me like I'm successful, but there's something that's just not right, because now I'm in more fear of losing this than I am of what I know the potential can be. And I think that's what truly makes you an influencer, is that you turn that into a reality and you're the guy that stands there and doesn't say everything's okay. You're not the guy that stands there and says, hey, you're doing the best you can. And that you're right where you need to be. You're the guy that says, no, it's time to go back and make this happen and get uncomfortable, because there's so much further that you can go. And that's what they know deep inside is really possible. And you're the person that actually says that, yes, it is. And here's how I've done it. And here's what you need to do to be able to do this. So I want to thank you so much for coming on to the show today and sharing this with folks.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I had a great time. All
right, folks, there you have it. VictorBellJr.com. You got to check this guy out. It is, it may seem intense, but he's not going to tart things up, and you're going to get the real deal, and from someone that has lived through it. Like I said, it's not theory. They've been through it. They've come back, and nothing succeeds like success. And, Victor Bell is a guy that has created success out of adversity more than one time. And it really is inspiring. So definitely check it out. And until next time on Influencers Radio, remember, you are the only real game changer.
You've been listening to Influencers Radio. To get all past shows and updates on future shows, visit influencersradio.com today or follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/influencersradio.